Andy, I had just have one question for you. Are
False.
you yeah,
Sorry,
false.
sorry.
Well, okay, that might be the correct answer. Are you on the short list for RFK Jr.'s vice presidential list?
He called. He asked if I would be interested. I told him I would consider it, but that unfortunately, due to the pesky Constitution of the United States of America, I remain presently ineligible to serve as president or vice president of the United States, and kindly had to withdraw my name from consideration.
You and Arnold Schwarzenegger, Andy.
Yeah,
So
I know. I know. We talk about it all the time, me and Arnie. Me and Schnitzel sit back and just talk about the America that could be.
okay, here's a warning for all of our listeners today. We're probably going to talk a lot of stupid politics stuff today
Oh
because
man.
there's just a lot of stupid politics stuff out there. The waste, wild ass statements, theories, and exaggerations, it's in full effect today. Andy, when you sent me this article about RFK Jr. considering Aaron Rodgers um, as a and sorry, the other name in
Yeah.
question was
Yeah.
Jesse the Body Ventura.
Yeah.
Most notably, I don't care, he was governor of Minnesota. He was most notably the ring announcer or one of the announcers for the WW. It was the WWF at the time, but now the WWE in its heyday. When you sent me this, Andy, I my first response was, "Is this a joke?" But no, it is real, Andy. It's being reported everywhere. Aaron Rodgers is a potential vice presidential candidate.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts there, Andy?
So listen, I'm going to tell you, Dave. So I am not interested in RFK. I said this before, right? As a candidate, he's not appealing to me. I am interested in him as a disruptive force and a third party option. And so I like the idea that he's campaigning, right? So two different things. With these vice presidential names are bannered about, and there were others bannered about as well. And apparently these other individuals have all declined, including Andrew Yang, Rand Paul, Tulsi Gabbard, others that sort of are broader than their parties they identify with. And they've also apparently said no. But Aaron Rodgers and Jesse Ventura both have expressed interest. I don't like Aaron Rodgers as a football player or as a person from what I've seen of him publicly. And as a longtime Packers quarterback, I have to basically loathe him, even if I respect his abilities on the field. So I'm not very interested in Aaron Rodgers, even though he seems to be the front runner of the two. But Dave, while you sarcastically mock the 38th governor of Minnesota, I love Jesse the Body Ventura. I love the body, man. First, we need a vice presidential candidate that has publicly worn oversized sunglasses and feathered boas on repeated occasions, right? So I'm down with that. Two, he's a very likable guy who does not give two F's about anything, and he'll speak his mind. He's completely independent. He ran as an independent Minnesota, had no chance according to the public media, and he won. And he didn't do a bad job. He didn't do a bad job. He's an appealing outsider, and I would actually genuinely like to hear him debate. I think he's a lot more capable than people give him credit for. He is a hilarious, former wrestler, announcer, character, actor. Dave, we spoke about Arnold. He was in
Predator.
right, right. I mean, Jesse is awesome. So I think it'd be fun to see him out there. I'd be much more interested in Kennedy Ventura than I would be in Kennedy Rogers. But if Rogers were the vice president, I'm hoping he would retire from the NFL. For that alone, I would give RFK a lot of credit just to get Aaron Rodgers the hell out of the NFL. Those are my thoughts, Dave.
I can give Jesse a little bit more credence because he was in government and he didn't do a terrible job. I know he had a rough a rough ending to his to his time. But can you imagine what we would go through with Aaron Rodgers? I mean, just go stifle cite ugh, my Wednesday, sort through like some of the things that he said on Pat McAfee or
Yeah.
any of these other places. I mean, would he be on the debate stage talking about going to his dark place and his dark room in his secluded area, and or I think it was called the dark retreat or whatever it was, and just having that time. I could just imagine all the places it would go on the debate stage, and where you would go overall with that. This is just where, but in all truth, I mean, I could give a little bit to Ventura because he was in politics, But this is just where RFK takes himself from being like somewhat credible candidate. I think some people would be appealed by what he says. He does have some waste comments. He does have some of those views that align more on the conspiratorial side. But you add Aaron Rodgers to that, and I think you've just now made yourself the joke ticket. But if you could add a little bit more credibility to that vice presidential one, then I think you have a realistic shot. It would be disruptive because you're going to have a lot of what Trump was initially. I think a lot of what Drew Trump was, here's this celebrity who has no filter, who's just calling it like it is, and it's appealing to everyday man.
Yeah.
And then you have Aaron Rodgers, who probably has a fringe segment of people who are all with him. So, and plus who are fans of him being a star football quarterback, multiple time MVP, a destroyer of lions type of thing. So, very interesting time on that front as well, Andy. So, any further comments on this, Andy?
I'll just say, I mean, it's usually played out, and what both of them do bring, especially Rodgers, is name recognition, a stark contrast with at least the current vice president and the presidential candidates in many ways, and that doesn't hurt, right? I mean, for Kennedy, a Kennedy Rogers ticket, which the URL was reserved for, right, would bring a younger person to the stage, somebody that's known nationwide. And look, even people who don't like him appreciate him as a football player. He brings, people will be curious. People will give him a listen, and that's good for Kennedy, right? That's all he wants is, hey, just consider us versus these other clowns that you know. Maybe the clown you don't know is better than the clowns you do know when the others are who we know. So I think it's interesting. It'll be fun. It sounds like he's going to make a decision soon. We'll see what happens, Dave.
All right. Well, we'll wrap up on that one, Andy. Let's go to another political comment. I warned you, we're here, everyone. We're going to be talking politics today. So, this one came out, and despite how Trump has come out on top on all of these primary things, he is for lack of anything else, he is the Republican nominee. But Andy, he continues to have a low favorability score amongst Americans, which is from a new ABC ISPAS poll in which they looked at over 500 adults um, just recently, the last couple of days, and found that 29%, only 29% have a favorable view, while 59% view him unfavorably. And yet he is like head and heels dominating the Republican Party. I have a couple thoughts on this, Andy. Mostly that this is not different than when he was president. I mean, he didn't have a very favorable view there when he was president.
Yeah.
But as you continually point out, he has a strong base, and that strong base, only 30% of what probably is the Republican Party, um, show up, and they are vocal. They're out there. They show up in these rallies with the Trump propaganda, the Trump uh, what are those NFT posters? They buy the Trump mugs, they wear the Trump glasses and hats, and they're vocal, they're loud, and they're proud, Andy. But it's still only 29% of
Yeah.
people who see them favorable. So that's my thought there, Andy. What are you thinking when you
And I,
see
I
that?
think as we've been saying, like Trump has a ferociously strong, highly dedicated, extremely limited group of support. I just don't think it's enough to win the election again, right? Even though he's leading in some states right now, right? Like there's a new poll that came out saying he's leading in Georgia, for example. At the end of the day, I think more Americans are turned off than they are turned on. More Americans don't want him to serve than do. Now that small percentage is going to come out and vote for him, like no doubt they are. So Joe Biden, maybe RFK, whomever else, they're going to have to get people to come out and vote, and that's always a question mark, right? But the reality is, like most Americans do not want to see another Trump presidency. I think the hurdle is too high, even for dynamic athlete Donald J. Trump to clear. I don't think he's going to be able to do it. And I think that I don't think that's going to change much. I don't think anything that happens in the next 8 months make Donald Trump more appealing to a broader group of voters, right? I think he's hit his ceiling. I think he's lost more than he's gained. I think Biden will pick up the man in the middle for the most part. Again, the economy, absent something catastrophic, the economy's getting better. Yes, inflation was a little bit high this quarter, but overall, like the usual indicators, people aren't going to change horses for no reason. I think they're generally okay with Biden, and he's got the war chest. Whereas Donald Trump's spending Republican money on, trying to buy his get out of jail free card. Joe Biden's got a ton of money that he's going to spend just tearing into Donald Trump for the next 8 months. That's gonna make a difference. It's gonna make a difference.
And Biden is using that money now. I think before he was not engaged during the Republican primaries when there were a lot of people in there. Now he has been engaged a lot, Andy, and he continues to tout the economy, and it is getting better. Despite there are, it's funny because the former president Trump puts out, when I was president, the stock market went up here and there, conveniently extending his time when he was actually president, and then limiting the time when Biden was actually in office, and saying, the stock market's only been up this much under Biden, but it was up this much under me, when in fact the stock market is all-time highs
Yeah,
where it's at. The economy is getting better. Unemployment is at a very low level, almost to the point where if you wanted a job, the only reason you don't have a job is because you're not really want a job,
yeah.
type of thing. That's how low the levels are. And then aside from inflation, yeah, I think the most people are generally in a better spot than they were a year ago, and he's using that money. Most recently, the Democrats came out with a new budget, or Biden published his new budget projections, and he's actually cutting 10 trillion, or I think it was 10, it was a lot, 3 trillion over 10 years. Sorry about that. 3 trillion over 10 years. Conveniently, Trump ran up the debt when he was in office. And so I think you're seeing a lot of those comparisons now where stick with Biden, and you'll be in a better position than that. So what do you think about that? This is a different view, honestly, Andy. Budget cutting and fiscal responsibility is not something typically associated with Democrats, who are more towards funding social programs and other opportunities, in which that means entitlements, once you give them, they never go away.
Yeah.
So that's always the rub, right? But here they are cutting money and proposing raising taxes. Biden's saying, "Hey, look, I'm taking action. I'm doing things." What would you have on the other side? So, what do you think about that, Andy?
Well, I mean, I think one, I mean, I'm not a budget analyst. I have not dug into Biden's numbers, but based on things past, while they say they're cutting the budget by X amount, usually that's smoke, mirrors, and lies, right? It's usually a reduction from a certain point in measurement, whereas in reality, the overall spending does increase and the deficit does increase. And I just based on all things the last 40 years, that's probably true in this case too. So I doubt the genuine honesty of this actually being a true budget cut and deficit reduction. I don't buy that. But again, I'm not a budget analyst. Somebody can dig into the numbers and prove that to be true or false. That being said, that we're in a point where we're looking at the Democratic candidate boasting that he's being fiscally responsible and managing the economy and the budget. Again, president really manage the economy, but they're trying to try to take that role, and every president says that. And you look at Donald Trump representing the Republican Party, which used to be, at least by name, the party of fiscal discipline and limited government. And that's 100% not Donald Trump, right? Nor most modern Republicans today, right? They are not fiscally responsible. They are as equally fiscally undisciplined as their Democratic counterparts. Trump spent a lot of money, didn't responsibly cut the budget. Now he's talking about maybe looking at entitlements or trying to find ways to reduce the deficit. But based on his past performance, there's no reason to believe that's honest either, right? So I don't think either one of them is really, a budget hawk. I think both of them are going to grow the deficit because that's what they're going to do. But again, you look at the two of them and you can't say, well, this one's fiscally responsible, this one's going to make a difference, this one's going to look out for future generations. Neither of them probably will. At least Biden's giving a lip service at this point. That's just not what you typically expect, right? That's not what you see. The last time Democrats, Republicans usefully came together to do something on the budget was Clinton and Gingrich back in the 90s, right? When they got to a balanced budget. We haven't seen that since, right? The federal government size and spending has grown enormously, largely under Republican presidents, George W. Bush, Donald J. Trump, right? But also Barack Obama and today Joe Biden.
Yeah, ironically, I mean the big remember, I mean for all of the things that Clinton gets a bad rap for, he gave Bush a budget surplus, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
there was it was not a deficit at that point in time. Andy, this has been an interesting time because I do think this is hitting on something about how political parties change over time and evolve. You know, we mentioned about the fiscal conservative part, about being a Republican, strong on foreign policy, strong in national defense, and you actually see a lot of the things going a lot in a different direction now. You see the Democrats being more about stronger foreign policy. You see them being more fiscally responsible. You do see the Republicans leaning more towards more blue collar things, and maybe that's an appeal of Trump. But you do see a little bit more of that. I've been struck by a couple things that I've seen, out there in the netherworlds of social media or the internet about people saying, look, I'm former military. I'm college educated. I've generally fiscally responsible. I've done, I believe in family values and I believe um, in support for other countries and everyday individuals. I don't see politics when I look through my viewfinder at work and things along those nature. And yet these individuals who used to probably align with Republicans but do not agree with the former president are being not just like pushed aside, but they're like being ridiculed and labeled and called rhinos, and they're called even worse. I mean, they're called pedophiles or things because siding with the Democrats. If you go to Pizzagate, because the Republicans have become a lot about conspiracies, Jewish space lasers, for example, or Pizzagate and all those things, deep state, and how Trump is going to root out the deep state. Actually, if you didn't know, Trump is the president already, working through Obama, who sits in his basement telling Joe Biden what to do. So that's weird. But anyways, but what do you think when you see these things? Because I'll tell you, Andy, I struggle with this. I do believe in strong family values. I do believe and having a faith-based basis in our communities and in our family units. I do believe in a lot of that, and yet I can't side with the Republicans anywhere. And so where do you line up on that?
Well, I mean, I think you're hitting two somewhat different but important topics, right? On one side, you've got the intolerance, right? What you see on social media, right? I mean, you referenced an example there. David French, an opinion writer, typically, I say, libertarian leaning Republican, getting he posted on Threads how he was getting thrashed after posting something on X, that was not supportive of the president. People are calling him, was it, I think, a was a degenerate because he doesn't support the president or former president Donald Trump. And that's right. You see this sort of raging intolerance from MAGA towards anybody that's not in the Trump camp. Now, to be fair, you also see it from those on the left if you bring up anything that doesn't align with the blue no matter who agenda, right? So if you're for example, I've made comments of that I don't particularly care for politicians' reactions after a gun violence incident where they politicize it immediately, right? That pisses me off. And a lot on the left will scream at you like, "Oh, we're going to wait for more murders and death." And it's like, well, wanting to take a certain approach on the issue of gun control or whatever issue it is, just because it doesn't align with your agenda, people get very intolerant there too. You see this all the time. I saw some in the last election when Howard Schultz was getting ready to possibly run for an independent presidency campaign, and the left went nuts that somebody might take votes away from their candidate of choice. You see that intolerance on both sides, and it's disgusting on both sides, to be honest. Even though right now, like the language and ferocity of Trump supporters is kind of gross, right? So that's one issue that's very real. But on the sort of like where you identify, these parties don't mean anything, and the labels don't mean anything anymore, right? I mean, whereas Republicans, I think, used to the three-legged stool of Ronald Reagan's Republican Party, right? I think it was, socially conservative, fiscally disciplined, strong national defense, right? Which were previously not really all under one camp so tightly. That kind of supported the old GOP. That's not Trump's Republican Party at all, right? Instead, it's a xenophobic, authoritarian, Russian Putin sympathizers, which is not what most Americans want. So I don't think if you ask somebody to define what is a political conservative, what is a liberal, what is a libertarian, I don't think there is a correct answer. I don't think anybody could properly define what those mean in any serious way, and I don't think there's one definition that applies. I wouldn't use any of those. I couldn't apply any of those labels to myself comfortably. I think they're messy and confused terms. RFK, potentially being the libertarian candidate, is not a libertarian traditionally, but he does align with where the Libertarian Party is today. Donald Trump is not traditionally what a conservative is in character or politics, but he's the leader of the Conservative Party today. And I don't know what Democrats, progressives, and liberals. I don't know what those terms mean in the Democratic Party today. So it's all nonsense gibberish to me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's where the popularity of the no labels brand comes in. You don't want to label, you want to put forth the best candidates who can probably bring forth some change and real positive outlook into this. And I do think that this is where the younger generations, I know we're men of a certain X, being Gen Xers, Andy, but I mean the millennials, the Gen Z, I mean, all of them, they're choosing not to have labels. I mean, throw in all many of the snide comments you want about pronouns and all. How do you identify? I
Yeah.
think from a political side, people are not identifying, and I think it's a lot more confusing. I try to always go in and go, who's going to be the best for this country when I make those decisions. I no longer just write straight down the party line anymore and just like, look, who's going to be the best. And I find myself, just oddly enough, Andy, researching the issues and understanding people's positions. Maybe that's what it's about, but maybe it's never been about that all along. And I'm just romanticizing about the past, Andy. So,
But
oh,
I think people like to be in tribes. I think as you grow, people like to be with this group or that group. There's a lot of identity and strength and unity in that. So I'm a conservative. I'm a Republican. I'm a Democrat. I'm a progressive. Like there's identity in that people like. But at the same time, you see consistently for the last 30 years, increasing identification as independents, increasingly people calling for more options, more parties, more candidates, more choice. I think that does align with millennials and Gen Z, more so than even than it did with our Generation X. And I think we're going to continue to see that. And I think we are hopefully eventually going to see an ending and a breaking of this duopoly system of awful politics that we've had in this country for a long time, and certainly has been exacerbated by the never getting off the stage boomers who will be running, as the main party candidates yet once again.
there you go. There you go. Andy, it's funny you mentioned, people align with tribes. I read a good book a little while ago, Truth Over Tribes, which is I think it's the title's like Pledging Allegiance to the Lamb, not the donkey or the elephant. And while it is a more of a religious space, it's focused on, following the truth. What is, from a religious standpoint, what do you believe and how does that show out? And you're not just confined to what a Democratic Party or the Republican Party is saying, but what how do you follow the teachings of Jesus and the Bible?
Yeah.
And I found that to be a fascinating point. I think it's really shaped a lot of the ways I look at things. Is like I don't want to be in this tribe that is labeled as X, Y, or Z. I want to, where does my faith align to my choices there? And so that I found that to be an interesting part. Andy, we haven't gotten to a couple other big stories I wanted to talk to you because we've spent so much time on this on politics today. But I warned everybody before jumping
Fair
into this.
warning.
We got to hit Andy. We can't. I don't want to do it today because I don't want to give it. I want to give it its full justice on Friday. We'll do a NFL check-in
All right.
on free agency. The Lions have been maybe act inactive in free agency. They've lost a couple people that I thought were key
Big things are
calls.
coming. Yeah.
Yeah. So it will be interesting, but let's give it another day or two, Andy, see what happens on Wednesday and Thursday, see if the Lions turn it around here. It's still a huge off season to go, but it is fun to see all the movements and such. So we'll go through that on Friday. So we'll talk a little bit more politics on Friday. And then you had also another story about what's going on in the state of Florida with regards to when people can and cannot do certain activities at a certain age. Um, we can do vote, we can serve our military, we can die for our country, yet we can't strip if we want to, Andy, until
Right.
we're of a certain age. So I'd like to hold that to Friday, unless there's any comments you want to make on it now.
No, no, it's an issue that I'm pretty passionate about, to be honest. So I look forward to getting into it. And Dave, for the record, you can strip anytime that you want. But yeah, I'd like to come back and discuss that. I think it's a good one. It's an important one. Football, fascinating, interesting, exciting. I think there's still some big things ahead, but it is really fun to watch the off season here. And I think you brought up a really interesting point there on how do you vote your values and your faith? And I think it's a big topic. I think about it all the time, and I think it'd be a good one to discuss as well because honestly, I think people uh, struggle and oftentimes feel compelled to do a certain thing or vote a certain way. And I think there's a lot to sort of peel back in that process because I think there's a lot of interesting considerations and ways to look at it. So I think that'd be fun to get into. Maybe a way to talk about politics. I haven't talked about some of the individuals that make me want to swallow my own vomit. So I look forward to all of those discussions, Dave.
Yeah, it's fun. And again, I think people get lost. And again, I don't want to go overly faith based on anybody here, but I mean, look, if you live by the simple teachings, and they really are simple and straightforward, you lose, you lose some of the things that we clearly see today in politics on all sides of the aisle. Um, and can see how those beliefs are exploited, and you can just see the deity worshiping that is just not not anything about what we're about. So, anywho, Andy, that's a good way to wrap up today. I'm sorry it was heavy on the politics. Maybe I'm not sorry. Maybe it's a good discussion points, but it was a wasteful Wednesday. So, with that, Andy, I'll catch up with you next time.